What's up, everybody? It's Kenneth Yim here with your October real estate market update. We just finished September's numbers, and let's go take a look and see what's actually happening. Stay tuned. All right, so the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the temperature of the market. That's the sales to new listings ratio. Let's go take a look. I'm sure many of you guys have heard me talking about this, but it's just a measure of the temperature of the market. If you look at the number of sales that happened in September and you divide that by the number of new listings that came on the market in September, then you'll get a little ratio. The theory is supposed to work like this. If the pace of the sales continues to remain the same and the number of new listings came on the market, we've just sold 2/3 of those new listings that came onto the market, which means we only have 1/3 left to sell for next month. It's kind of scary. And you can kind of see that in the average price. Let's look at the gray line here. That's just all housing types in all of the GTA. So whatever TREB tracks for the Greater Toronto Area. And since January 96, prices are just been shooting up. Maybe we had a small little dip here in April 2017 when we had the Fair Housing Plan, but since then it's just skyrocketed back up. Let's zoom into the past 3 years, and the black line here is when COVID hit in March 2020. You can see it's a little dipped a little bit, but it came straight back up, and we're way past what the pre-pandemic levels are. For sure, it's happening in detached Toronto housing, and for condos downtown Toronto, that's a CO1 and CO8 districts. We're kind of almost there for pre-pandemic levels, but not quite. I mean, we're still over $800,000 as the average price. You can kind of see that in the number of sales volume. Again, in March, just before the pandemic, we had about 8,000 sales. It dropped down to way below 3,000 or so. At the very peak, we pretty much doubled that amount. So at the beginning of this year, from January 21 to about May, that's when all the sales happened. You kind of remember it was kind of crazy. And then since then, it's dropped off, leveled off. But of course, keep in mind, this is still higher than pre-pandemic levels. Again, the fall market hits and it's starting to go back up again. So let's take a look at the sales to new listings ratio, which I kind of briefly touched upon at the beginning of this video, where we're taking a look at the number of sales that happened that month divided by the number of new listings. And you can see that the overall market in general in the gray is still in a seller's market. We're at 67%. Same with detached homes, pretty much the same. Condos, however, are more of a balanced market though, where if you have the number of sales on the market, actually, let me get the exact numbers. Okay, so 653 sales, divide that by 1,278 new listings onto the market. So we're looking at about 51%. That's on average. However, I should caution that the average price still keeps going up. Look at it climb all the way. We're at $811,000 for a downtown Toronto condo. And you won't find these stats in the Market Watch numbers. This is just something I put together by looking at the CO1 and CO8 districts, combining the numbers and doing some math, just so you know, for all the realtors out there. We're working with some clients in around the average price or just under, and every single listing that's out there is a bidding war. So there's certainly not enough supply to meet the demand out there. Don't think that it truly is a balanced market, because I don't think it is. We're just talking about on average. There's a lot of condos that get listed anywhere from several million to the starter condo of 500,000 in downtown Toronto. Actually, it's more like 600,000 now. If you're going to be buying a condo in downtown Toronto, don't think that it's actually that balanced. I think it's going to shoot back up anytime soon. Some of the numbers get kind of skewed between the sales to new listings ratio. So another number I like to look at is the months of inventory. And it's not sales to new listings ratio. It's kind of similar, except we're going the other way around. We're going from active inventory instead of new listings. So whatever's left on the market, divide that by the number of sales. And if we look at, let's say 2020, where we had 18,000 active listings, things were selling at 11,000 units per month, then we'd have like a 1.4 or something times ratio, right? So it would take 1.4 months to sell. That's the theory anyway. This month we had 9,000 active listings and 9,000 sales. So we're looking at probably a ratio of around 1. Yeah, just around 1 here in the all housing types. Condos, on the other hand, were close to 2. We're looking at 1.75 months in order to sell them all of the inventory that we have existing. It's a little bit lower than what happened at the beginning of this year, where actually the end of last year, I would say, where it just shot up because everybody was escaping downtown Toronto. And then around November or so, people started realizing that, hey, it's actually not that bad. And they snapped everything up all the way to the first quarter, end of this first quarter, where all those sales actually happened. And then it's starting to creep back up slowly. You know, the number of sales isn't hitting the number of active listings. I mean, it's still historically really good. I mean, if you look at some of the history from way back when, we're looking at, 7 months of inventory and then even higher, right? After the global financial crisis. Even the Fair Housing Plan crash, it didn't really spike up that much. I think Actually, we are still much lower than where they were back then at the Fair Housing Plan time. So I think we're still overall healthy. I would also say that if you look at the number of sales that actually happens in Canada, it's kind of weird, these numbers, right? It says seasonally adjusted at annualized rates. So I don't know how they adjust it, but they assume that every year at this point, it's going to have around, let's call it 600,000 units on average nationwide. That's the number of sales. And in Toronto, we're looking at about 120,000 sales. So we're looking at close to a quarter of sales happening in Toronto alone compared to the rest of the country. So I don't know. It seems like Toronto is such a big part of the overall Canadian market. And we all know that. It's no surprise. Toronto's probably the biggest real estate market in all of Canada. And the reason why that's important is because if you want to live in a major city, you want to have access to all the area amenities and just walk everywhere, and you're kind of used to that lifestyle, it's hard to move to a smaller town. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened during the pandemic. In fact, it's happened a lot. But essentially, in Canada, there's only 3 major cities you're going to move to. It's Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. And if you're coming from somewhere else outside of the country, well, this is where all the jobs are, in the cities, right? I think it's pretty important. I mean, I just came from a conference in the States where I was talking to a lot of people, and it's pretty common to move from state to state to live, right? Like people start from, I don't know, it's called LA, and they move to Miami, or from Houston to Fort Lauderdale. That happened a lot, and it's pretty common. On top of that, they have this 1031 exchange, which I'm sure you heard about. It's basically that your capital gains get deferred if you buy a property within, I think, 45 or 90 days, depending on the rules. I'm not really sure how it's structured. But essentially, you get to defer your capital gains, whereas in Canada, you don't get that. I mean, you have your primary residence, which you don't get taxed on capital gains on, which is pretty cool. But for any investment properties, the inventory is not getting unlocked because investors aren't selling the properties because they don't want to get hit with the capital gains. Think about that. So essentially, real estate prices are just a reflection of supply and demand, right? If you have high demand and low supply, then it's just going to raise the prices till it kind of matches out a little bit, right? That's just how it works, and that's how the real estate prices are, and that's why the cost of living is so high in Canada. And let's just face it, the government is pretty much like a giant Ponzi scheme where we have the younger workforce, productive workforce that are paying tax dollars to support the older population that aren't working for social services and all that kind of stuff, like, great healthcare. That's why people want to be in Canada. And we're not having as many kids anymore. There's an interesting theory I read that they're saying that people aren't having kids anymore because the cost of housing is so high, which kind of makes sense. You don't have a place to raise kids in, so people aren't having kids. You know what that means? It just means that we're going to have to immigrate more people. We're going to have more immigration. And actually, it's publicly stated that that's what Canada's trying to do. We're trying to have 1.2 million people come into Canada over the next 3 years, which is pretty aggressive based on historical immigration policies that we've had. We've had anywhere from 300,000 people come in a year. Now we're at 400,000, which is a target anyway, just to get through what the pandemic has caused for us, right? And we are a great place to be. A lot of people want to come to Canada. So it's going to happen. But guess what? We need a place to house everybody. And that's not going to happen anytime soon because it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years to put a shovel underground for a new project because all the zoning policies are a little bit difficult. And zoning policies. We just had our federal election that just happened recently, and the biggest thing on their platform was the rising cost of housing, right? So what they did was they, said it was blind bidding. They said it was immigration, foreign buyers and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that's true. They're not going to be able to do anything about it. Whatever they said in their election platform, sure, they're going to put those in place, but it's not going to change anything. The biggest reason for the lack of housing supply is at the municipal level. So you got federal, provincial, and then municipal. The government of Canada is not going to be able to force the city of Toronto to loosen up their zoning policies. And I know why there's planning. I'm not saying that planning shouldn't be existing, right? Because if you're living in a neighborhood, you don't want all of a sudden a high rise as your next door neighbor, or you don't even like a sixplex, like high density housing. You don't want that in your neighborhood because it's going to change the fabric of the neighborhood. I get it. And also, there's like infrastructure that just can't support it, right? And maybe more crime or whatever. The local residents aren't going to allow these zoning things to happen, right? So it's going to be hard to get more housing into Canada, into Toronto. With low turnover, high immigration, high demand, and escalating costs. You have high labor costs, you have high materials costs, and high land costs. Everything's raising because of inflation. Cost of living is going up. Construction workers are employees as well too, and their wages are going to go up as well. I think all that has just been amplified also on top of that with low interest rates. I mean, look, the GDP growth has actually shrunk last quarter by 1.2%. Yet inflation is going up by 4.1% year over year. They're not going to be able to raise interest rates anytime soon. Plus the ballooning debt, don't forget that, their government's debt repayment is going to be affected by increased interest rates. So it's not going to be able to happen. It's just going to, like, they're not going to be able to raise interest rates because their payments are just going to be skyrocketing. They can't afford those debt repayments anymore. I know that, okay, whatever. I know that the Bank of Canada is separate from the actual government and power. I get it. They're supposed to be separate parties, but let's just face it. They pretty much run hand in hand. I don't know. I don't see the cost of Toronto housing coming down anytime soon. Forget about these graphs I just showed you. That's my take on it anyway. So let me know what you think about the comments below. It's a shame that it's becoming so unaffordable. Something's got to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. There's just too many layers to this and too many problems to solve before we bring the cost of housing down anytime soon. And name one city in the world that has done a good job at fixing affordable housing. There's probably not anywhere that you want to live anyway. So that's my take on it. Hopefully it makes sense. I'm not that negative. I just think that house prices can't go down. They won't go down. And mark my words, they're not going to go down for the next few years anyway. All right, take care. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Add it up.